All right, so it looks like we've got everyone on stage. So, welcome everyone. This is episode 4 of the Hideout, and this is going to be a really awesome one because we've got a topic that we're going to be talking about in comics and kind of the evolution of comics in the NFT and Web3 space. That is obviously something that's very near and dear to us in the Satoshiverse, but also to each of the individuals that are going to be on the panel. We have a stacked panel today with some of the real leaders in comics in the Web3 space. So super excited to have everyone on. I think this is probably going to be one of my favorite topics that we've talked about. So I guess we have, I'll do a quick introduction, let everyone know who's here, and then each of you can kind of introduce yourselves and what you're doing in the space. So I guess first we have Spencer, who's going to be helping me host today from Apollo Entertainment. From Comics and Crypto, we're going to have Sean from McFarlane Digital and McFarlane Toys. We're going to have Trevor. Then we're going to have Matt from Palm NFT and Batcals, and then Carl from 247 Comics. So why don't we start with Trevor? Why don't you kick us off and tell us a little bit about McFarlane?
All right. First of all, thanks for having me. Very exciting. I'm Trevor. I am one of the newer members to the McFarlane Toys team, and I'm the current product manager on the McFarlane Toys digital platform that we announced, or at least teased, over the last coming weeks, and we'll be announcing in full this Thursday, which is very exciting for us. And McFarlane Toys we're a collectible. We're at our core, we're a collectible toys company. We've been around for over 30 years, worked with pretty much every, creating some of the best collectible toys and action figures in the industry. We kind of wrote the book on the idea of high-end collectible toys. Sorry, and now the trash truck is coming, so it's getting too loud. And it was also a company that founded by Todd McFarlane, who's one of the arguably greatest comic book writers of all time, and creator of so many iconic comics and stories, as well as creator of Spawn.
Very cool. Well, really, really glad to have you guys with us. I've heard and seen a little bit of what you guys have planned, and it's so cool, and I can't wait to dive in and hear more and talk to everybody more about it. Why don't we move next to Matt from Palm NFT and Backhouse? You guys just had some exciting an exciting announcement with DC that I'm excited to talk a little bit more about later. But why don't you tell us a little bit more about yourself and what you're trying to accomplish in the Web3 space?
Yeah, thanks so much for having me. Yeah, it's been a quiet morning here at Palm NFT Studio. Yeah, we launched DC Collectible Comics today, which is going to be weekly drops of comics from DC on the blockchain for the first time. Not the first DC NFTs; they were on VV. Shout out to Todd McFarlane and everybody who holds those. Always want to make that very clear. But these are the first comics that DC's done. So we're super excited, and the first one is a comic called The Legacy Cow that cow holders from the Bat Cow collection actually got a chance to vote on the entire storyline and narrative happening in that comic with Jim Lee and the team. And then the first collectible comics going on sale on Thursday, that's going to be Superman #1 from 1939. So it's been a massive week. At Palm, we work with brands like DC Comics and others to really bring amazing Web3 experiences to the rest of the world. We launched with Damien Hirst's Currency Project. We work with Universal Music Group, Warner Brothers, a lot of other companies that we haven't announced yet. But yeah, I've been in decentralized technology for a while. I was CMO at Kraken. I've been involved in a number of other NFT projects, Warps, Broadside, which is minting soon, and was at BitTorrent early in the sort of distributed technology days, and a pirate radio DJ in my younger days. So I'm just about anything that pushes decentralized creativity. That's been scaling that's been my life's work. So super excited to be involved in the Web3 business. It's the most exciting time, I think, to be doing anything like this.
Wow, Matt. Yeah, no, that sounds awesome. And I know I've been following Palm's kind of journey into the space and loving everything you guys are doing with DC and Universal and all the other big creators that you're bringing on. So kudos there. It's been an awesome trip so far, seeing what you guys have done. So next, I want to go to Carl, who is with 247 Comics. They're doing some really interesting licensing models and whatnot in as part of what they're doing. But we'll jump into that later. Carl, why don't you give us the rundown?
Hey, GM, thanks for having us. So thanks, Trevor. Thanks for everyone for inviting me on this. 247 Comics is very simple. I think for us, it's really taking it back to the basics with great art, great stories. Our structure is creator-led. Grew up in the 90s and just loved Image Comics and even Valiant, and just loved that time and era when the creators had a lot to say and the infrastructure was built to support them. Our ultimate mission, though, is to adapt web comics for Web3, and a lot of that comes down to what it means to include the community in a decentralized way, but also telling fresh stories collectively. So that's what we're doing here at 247 Comics.
Awesome. Well, really excited to get deeper into that. Sean, why don't you tell us a little bit? I've been a big fan of what Comics and Crypto is doing, but why don't you tell us a little bit more for those of us who don't know?
Hey, everybody. Thanks so much for having me up here. So for me personally, I've been a collector and investor in collectibles my entire life. And we started a podcast recently, myself, Spencer, who's also up here as well, and Kevin Loader. Big shout out to Kev. And together we started a podcast that focuses on physical and digital collectibles and kind of like bridging the world between the two spaces. So it's been really exciting talking to physical collectors and helping them educate them about the digital space, and then digital, helping them educate about the physical, and just kind of figuring out that connection because the space is so new. So it's really exciting getting involved in different communities and talking about this space.
Incredible. No, that's I know I was on your show, and that was such a good experience. And I really think that there is such a need for thoughtful discussion and leadership within the space, especially at these early stages where we're really trying to figure things out. And so before Spencer jumps into the questions, I'll just quickly introduce myself because I see a ton of new faces here. I am Nick Frontera. I am one of the founders of Apollo Entertainment and the Satoshiverse, which is a blockchain-based superhero universe that we've been building with DC and Marvel comic artist Jose Delbo, who is, for those of you who don't know, an 88-year-old comic artist and was one of the first big comic artists to enter the NFT space back in early 2020. He released the first NFT comic book called Death No Escape. And since around October of 2020, we've been building the Satoshiverse, which is based on a character called Satoshi the Creator, who is this Bitcoin superhero who is leading the people in a revolution after the aristocracy takes over and tries to bury blockchain technology. So really playing into a lot of the themes that are prevalent in this space and creating an entire new superhero universe and IP around that. Right now, we're building a high-fidelity play and earn game in Unreal Engine that is scheduled to be released in alpha in December of this year, so getting real close to that. And we have two collections. We have the Legionnaires collection and the 8-Mo Army collection, which are two unique avatar collections that give you all sorts of holder benefits within our universe. But at our core, we are a comic NFT project. So from our beginnings with Jose until the way we're instilling, comics at different points within our universe, we have been very proud to be part of the early history of comics in this space, and that's why I'm so excited about being part of this panel. So last, I'll pass it over to Spencer, who will take over and get into some awesome questions.
Thank you, Nick. So my name is Spencer. I've been working with Apollo for about a year and a half now. Then like Sean said, I'm also on the Comics and Crypto podcast. where we talk about collectibles and comics on a regular basis. Super excited to have all you on here and excited to get into these questions. So first one, I'm going to open it up to everyone. And Sean, I'm going to put you on the spot here and have you go first. What are some of your favorite comic characters and stories, and why?
I'd probably go back. I mean, going to big shout to the DC comics, but Action Comics 1, Superman is probably one of my favorite characters. So Action Comics 1 to me that's such a special comic because it's the foundation of all superheroes, and Superman especially. So, and just doing the stories of how it was created and Jerry Siegel and what they went through to bring that character to life, it's pretty remarkable. So, yeah. So for me, Superman holds a special place in my heart for sure.
You guys could just jump in, or I can call on you, whichever. If anybody's supposed to jump in.
Sure, I'll jump in. I mean, mine is typically you probably won't hear these much, but the two characters I grew up loving, as a kid in the '90s, was Azrael, who basically took over the Batman role at some point when his back was broken by Bane. I love that guy just because my dad's a pastor. I grew up in church, so I kind of grew up in this very orthodox world, and then kind of diving into the world of comics, I just was very relatable to that character. And then the other one's Darkness, by Marks of History. That character always just spoke to me. I always just loved the universe he created, and what he did to kind of question the traditions of kind of the faith. So yeah, I think there's a little bit of a theme as to the stuff I love, but those are the two.
Yeah, I have to say for me, it was, anything that my grandpa was doing. Jose did so many different characters, but he was, most of the time when I was a kid, he was doing Wonder Woman and Transformers. So I remember, reading those comics and just being so into Wonder Woman as a hero. I thought was so cool in the comic books. I mean, I loved Superman and Batman. Those were kind of defaults, but for me, reading and knowing, oh wow, my grandfather's actually drawing these, and seeing, what went into it behind the scenes, and then seeing how that translated into the actual comics that were coming out. That was special for me. And then, reading some of his old, he did a lot of Westerns, Billy the Kid, The Lone Ranger. Those weren't exactly superheroes, but as far as comics go, I thought those were super cool comics from, back in the 60s and 70s.
I guess I'll go next. So for me, I feel, well, first of all, I'm on the McFarlane Toys account, so I'm going to have to give deference to a Spawn as being a favorite character. And I guess then within that world, I think for me, one of the characters that I think is really cool looking is just the Redeemer character. I think it's just awesome. I just like that style. I guess for me, coming also like more personally, I've been lucky between like working with McFarlane Toys and previously the work with Vivi, and then work in the games industry before that. Like being able to make content with so many of these characters is something that's like very fun and exciting for me. So I kind of jump around to whoever is like whatever kind of character I'm like working on at the moment is like a character that I'm like probably most excited about, because it's fun to just like not just like read these stories or like interact with these characters in that way, but also like to create with and around them is just something that's like it's very fun for me. So I guess historically, other characters like working on the when we did like when I was with Vivi doing the Spider-Man drop over there, I really liked this. I like Spider-Man as a character a lot, so I think that might be one that I would go with. Right now, I'm also playing the Gotham Knights game, so very excited about those characters. All the not so much Batman himself, but all the various flavors of sidekick that have existed around him: the Robin, Nightwing, Batgirl, Red Hood, all that fun stuff.
I can jump in. Yeah, for me it was, and like I'm really not just saying this because of my affiliations with DC, but I mean I said this to DC the first time I met them. It was Death in the Family. It was the idea that the audience got to mess with the work, with the creators. That was such a big deal to me as a kid, and I remember reading Death in the Family right around the same time as like hip hop was really hitting me as like a 9-10-year-old kid. Albums like 3 Feet High and Rising by De La Soul, where there were just so many samples, and then I'm reading a story where I know that the kids who read I was reading the graphic novel. I didn't get the original comics, but I knew that the kids who had got those comics got to phone that phone line and actually say whether Robin lived or died. And these things, to this, like, this was the operating system that was instilled in me as a kid. It wasn't just that I enjoyed the story, is that it was the first time I felt like, oh, I get to do this too. I get to mess with stuff too. Like, the creators and audience can be all on the same level. And so that was just such a big deal to me. There's so many other comics I enjoyed, like Dark Knight Returns was amazing, and Watchmen, and a lot of the like 80s anime was huge for me. Akira, obviously, Project Eiko, and a lot of other stuff kind of outside mainstream comic book culture as well. But for me, it was the idea. It was something being communicated that you get to do this too. That was a really big deal for me.
Awesome. Appreciate these responses, guys. It's super fun to be on here with people who are really passionate about comics and are really into this stuff. I guess real quick for me, Doctor Strange has always been my favorite. Growing up as a kid, I was always really into fantasy type stuff. So, like Merlin and, Lord of the Rings, things like that. So, I think within the comic book world, that kind of resonates the most with me. So the next question we're going to open up to everyone once again. And Nick, why don't we start off with you? So the question is, how does Web3 technology allow comic IP holders to interact with their fans in ways that weren't possible before?
Well, for me, it's interesting because it's like other forms of IP. I think for IP holders generally, Web3 has done a lot to enable community interaction, right? Because you have this layer of connection to your consumer base, to your customers, right? And as an IP holder, you can know not just what they've consumed, but how much they've consumed, how frequently they consume. Is this someone who's always showing up, for every drop? Is this someone who bought and then, just, diamond hands types of things? And you have all these analytic tools to really understand who your consumer is and what they are, what they like, how they want to interact. And so I think that as a base layer, as an IP holder, you have a lot of tools at your fingertips to create more meaningful experiences using the IP for those consumers. And I think that, something that Matt said, I mean, exactly what he was doing as a kid with the ability to call in. I think, we're already seeing with what Palm's doing with the DC. So I won't go too into it, but I love that, right? I love that there's a way for consumers and fans to, because they hold this NFT, participate in the ecosystem, participate in the storytelling, participate in, just being part of what is being built, and not just reading something that's in front of them, but actually having some sort of, I guess, stake in that ecosystem, not necessarily financial, but just they feel like they're a part of it in a way that's more meaningful than before. And then, I think that's just, the first layer of the onion. I mean, we're, for example, using the Web3 and the ownership of our comic IP to enable gamified experiences, with the video game we're building and everything we're doing within Satoshiverse. And so there's all sorts of earning opportunities and whatnot for those who love our IP and want to connect with it. But at the end of the day, I think, being able to the value that Web3 provides is that ownership layer, both for people who actually own these digital assets because it's theirs, right? And that all the property rights and things that come with that, but also for, IP holders and creators, because now you can engage with your consumers and your collectors in a whole new way.
Thanks, Nick. Trevor, you want to go next?
Yeah. For me, I think probably, and this was something that I honestly, like, I've been in the space for a while, and I feel like I realized this honestly rather recently as we were like building and connecting with audiences in the space, not just around like the work with McFarlane Toys, but also with like the other projects I worked on, namely Tomorrowland. The things that really stood out that were interesting was this was an opportunity to engage a fan base on a level that's honestly beyond like anything that's come before. And what I mean by that is like very specifically around this idea of like if you are like if you have a brand or an IP or you're the rights holder of something and you have you know who your super fans are. These are the people who are so deeply engaged in whatever you're making. They love what you're doing and they basically they they're the level of engagement where they're not just like buying everything you put out, but they're evangelizing it. They're talking about how much they love it with everybody else around them, and that's kind of the level that we could get to pre NFT. Now that there's NFTs out there and you have this ability, this like effectively this asset that has value and it has a permanence to it, and it is inherently self-rewarding when you talk about it with other people and share it with other people, it allows us to get to almost like a whole new level of depth for the superfan, which is now they're going beyond just like engaging and buying in and evangelizing it. Now they're to that level where they're sharing in the success. And I think that is something that is really interesting from a like a general brand engagement perspective, but also specifically to the collector's perspective, because it's a whole new level of like depth of what it means to collect and what it means to love a brand or an IP or like be a super fan of something. And I think that is really interesting. And I think we're really, really like, I mean, we always joke like we're early in this space. I think we're so early and just barely beginning to realize the power that NFTs can have specifically to your super fans. And that's really important because those super fans are the ones that at a lot of time for a lot of different IP really carry that IP and keep it going. So being able to take that to the next level is something that I think is really exciting and interesting about this space.
So, I'll go next. That was great, Trevor. And I'm just looking up on the wall right now and just seeing I have some graded comics, and they're just kind of staring back at me. And I'm a huge fan of all these comics, but what Web3 really does, it allows the fans to now have an experience because these collectibles are now an access token. What Palm NFT is doing with Bat Cow is a perfect example. You own a Bat Cow, and now you're part of you have the opportunity to be part of a journey to help write the future for these comics, and that's super special. That's really special, and that's never been possible before, but it's possible now because of Web3, and that's incredibly exciting.
Matt, want to go next?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, I'm in agreement with everybody else, and thank you for all the kind words about what we're doing. But yeah, there's so much you can do now. I struggle, honestly. My thing I struggle with is like, was this possible before? There's some things that you couldn't do technologically, but it's just, I feel like it's a cultural moment more than anything. The last 2 years, people have just been like, we want to do things differently. We want to be communities in a different way than we were in Web 2. And I wonder if it would happen maybe without blockchain or not. But like, this tech's been around for a while, and it just sort of never really scaled. And now it has, and so much of it is about people being ready for organizing differently as well, I think. And that's the piece that's most exciting to me is we're sort of transitioning away from this model of I'm a brand or I'm an artist or I'm a creator and you're my followers, to we are a community and we can all see each other and we've all got skin in the game in the same way, which is very important, right? That's the crypto piece, how that all fits in, and it really matters, and it's allowing us to just organize differently and participate differently. And I think we've only just, like, where we are right now with this is, I don't want to be like it's early, but we haven't even scratched the surface of the sentimental value of NFTs yet, which is going to happen more as we scale. Like eventually, I think that'll be more important probably than the sort of cash value. And we're just still getting warmed up with that. With still such a small audience paying attention to these things, but it's growing fast, and I'm really excited about next year already.
Thanks, Matt. Carl, you want to finish us off here?
Sure. Web3 technology. I mean, there's so much. I feel like a lot of the guys already covered most of it. But I think at the end of the day, it is about the niche itself, where I feel like the internet has always been about focusing on the niche, and more so than ever, you're kind of seeing like tribalism at its best, where I think, at the end of the day, Web3 is about ownership and transparency. But so far, the utility has mostly been proven in the form of social utility. And so you see folks that are aligned with their, favorite Bored Apes, their favorite Zukis, Contact Surface Satoshi, the project, and even like you look at the audience today, like people are aligned with the Batman brand. And so you're seeing tribes form on the internet, and it's connecting with folks on a deeper emotional level than ever. So I think, personally, I'm super excited. I don't know about you guys, but I was a very kind of IRL, work in the office guy, and then pandemic hit, and now I'm fully working from home, and I'm fully virtual, and I love it. And I feel like that's the future of working, and Web3 is the perfect platform and structure to support that. And so, yeah, I think that's what Web3 is all about. And personally, I was a producer, and I'm still a producer in film and TV, but I also had an agency that produced for all the movie studios. So, like, if you went to Comic-Con, I don't know if you guys went to one of the largest Dungeons and Dragons activation was something I produced before the pandemic hit, and I literally shut down that company, merged it with another agency, so I could do Web3 full time. So I'm knee deep in this now. Gave it a thriving business to dive into this because I actually believe in that much. I'm very bullish, and for everyone in the audience who's scratching the surface of Web3. I know there's the market sentiment on the macro level that there's a lot of bears out there, but this is the perfect time to get involved. So if you see a project that resonates with you emotionally, and you see a story that you really believe in, this is a time to be part of it. So that is really the power of Web3. I could elaborate more on what we're doing in it later.
Awesome. Thanks, Carl. Yeah, totally agree with your last point. I think, for the most part, everyone who's here is no longer just here for the money and for the cash grab, but are really here for the technology and for all the experiences that we can have. And I think comics are a great platform for that. So next question is to Sean. So as a massive comic collector, what are some of the things about the Web3 digital collecting experience that excite you?
One of the biggest things that's really excited me is accessibility. I have friends. I've been blessed to have a lot of friends, different parts of the world. In some of the places they live, it's tough. It's tough to get mail because I want to send them comics that they can own and enjoy, but it's not possible in a lot of places that they live. So now I can do that with these digital assets, and that's really impressive. I mean, even as a collector, but also an investor, there's people who are sending $50,000, $100,000 plus comic books in the mail system. And it's terrifying because these things get lost. It happens. I've heard quite a few nightmare stories. So being able to instantly buy, sell, and trade these around the world is a game changer. It's a game changer, especially if there's an opportunity through localization, being able to change languages on these things, which is something we've talked about before. I know through design it could be complicated for past comics, but my goodness, if there's an opportunity to change languages on these comics, man, really, really allow people around the world to enjoy them, that's something that's really special as well.
Awesome. Thank you, Sean. Next question is for Trevor. So McFarlane Toys is one of the most successful comic-focused collectibles companies in the physical space. But how is the company leveraging Web3 and NFTs to further that success in the digital collecting space?
Yeah, so for us, and of course, we're going to be talking about this a lot more on Thursday. But I think the big thing for us is we have, McFarlane Toys is largely focused on when we do collectibles, they're toys. So I think honestly what Comics and Crypto was hinting at here actually applies to us to a whole other level. Shipping boxes around the world and collecting toys, like they take up space. And so in some level, this kind of started as like, we have one of the problems that our audience faces is they just run out of space to store this stuff. Like you can only have so many shelves in your house that you can put awesome figures on. One of the nice things about going to digital space is it's functionally infinite. So it allows people to collect infinitely with it. So that was one thing that it made it kind of a no-brainer for us in that sense. However, I think the thing that's most interesting about it, at least from my perspective, is how it allows us to enrich the collecting experience in a way that like there are just constraints in the physical that you face in the physical world. Sharing your collection. If you're a physical collector, the only way for people to see your collection is to go over to your house, unless you're going to throw it all in your car and bring it over to them. But let's be real, nobody has ever done that. So the idea that you can have your collection in a space where other people can come over and look at it and share in it, I think is really exciting. It really adds to the social aspect of collecting. It adds to the kind of I guess for lack of a better, the flexing side of collecting, where you're kind of showing off what you have. Digital allows us to effectively do that anywhere in the world instantly. So that's really exciting for us. Digital also, like going to a digital collecting space and like a Web3 collecting space, allows us to, especially now that the technology's gone there, we can now basically I guess guarantee the quality and like hit the quality that we're hitting with our physical collectibles. We can hit it in the digital space, just because the technologies between like the Web3 technologies that we're building on, as well as the kind of more standard like the rendering tech that allows us to deliver these collectibles at that high quality. And then on top of that, there's also the I would say kind of the ability to play, and for lack of a better word, the gamified side of this. I don't like that term, just because it's so loaded. But the idea that you can actually play with these collectibles and not damage them because they're digital, that's something that is exciting, because usually we have a lot of collectors who just collect their stuff and keep it in box because they're worried about damaging it. That is something that functionally disappears in the digital space. The idea that you can have a richer play experience in the digital space. I mean, we all see there's a reason kids don't play with physical toys anymore, and they're all playing like video games. It's just a richer experience. It's like a richer environment to play, and you can do more in that space. And for us to be able to tap into that with our collecting, our collectibles, is something that's just really exciting to us. So there's a lot of different pieces to this that make it really interesting, exciting for us. And we're also happy that we feel like the technology is at a place where we can deliver at a place where we're like matching or exceeding the expectations of people who are traditionally physical collectors only. So that's something that's really what's inspiring us about building this space and jumping in now.
Nice. Thanks, Trevor. Yeah, I really resonate with what you say about the fact that you don't have to do your collecting in the physical space, because I'm a pretty nomadic person, and I travel around quite a bit, rarely live in one place for too long. So it's difficult for me to bring all my physical collectibles with me everywhere I go. So I really appreciate being able to just have everything on my phone. That's definitely one of my favorite capabilities of NFTs and digital collecting. So next question is to Carl. So 247 Comics is building a really interesting comic distribution and licensing model where your NFT holders actually own the characters, and 247 Comics must license those characters from holders in order to continue building stories with them. Could you go a little bit more into that model and talk about why did you decide to go with that, and if you think the industry will end up adopting it?
Yeah, it's pretty funny. I think I gave Spencer tons of alpha when we first last met, but we haven't fully released this yet. But so whoever's on this call is definitely getting some advanced notification of what's going to happen. But I'll go a little bit into that. But I think just to kind of set up some context, I think at the end of the day, like technology is about solving problems, and a lot of what Sean and Trevor mentioned, there's few problems I saw that I think all of us can relate. Like me personally, my man cave became my mother's garage, and then at one point I grew up old enough to have my own space. Then I got married, and my wife is OCD and likes very clean, living spaces. So it all moved into my office. And so now my office is just like packed with like collectible stuff. So I have comic books, I have my comic art, I have my toys, I have my Magic the Gathering cards. So space is a problem for all of us, right? Space is getting more expensive as population grow. So that's one problem that, Web3 does solve. Two is, I think, efficiency. I think one of the things that, Trevor mentioned was like this shelling, like you want to like show off what you got. Imagine now you could have, your man cave online. And then I think that one of the most important things that I love to talk about and why our model is important going forward and why we went down this route is transparency, which is one of two pillars I mentioned about Web3. And for us, it's really, at the end of the day, on the ownership side, it's, I'll give you guys an example. Like I see a lot of Batman cowls in the crowd, and I'm not really sure I don't know what the ownership rights look like for that, but I'm sure you guys kind of got it all figured out. But for me, imagine I bought a Batman cowl, and then you have an NFT, and then one day you go watch the next Justice League movie, and you see the Batman cowl you own on the big screen. And then imagine even crazier is the blockchain facilitates some sort of royalty payout to you as the owner of that cowl every time it's used, even when it's being built into a toy. So at 24/7 Comics, we're not Batman. We don't have Batman, but we're inviting the community to come join us as we back the next generation of creators who are building original IP from the ground up. And not only would you be able to participate and having a direct line of sight to the creators and what they're doing, you can potentially own some of the characters in the universe that they're creating. And then second is transparency. Our model is not just to benefit the holders of the NFTs, but also the IP creators in perpetuity. We worked closely, one creator who I went after right away when we put this comic book company together. By the way, it totally by accident, is Justin Jordan. We actually wanted to just create one comic. And the reason behind that was, in film and TV, it's really hard to make content. And so 2 years ago, I was able to get a producer deal, and I went out and searched for all my favorite comics, and one of them was Luther Strode. It was the comic that actually brought me back into reading comics, and that was written by Justin Jordan. And so, I went after him. Obviously, like that book was already taken. But then I said, "Hey, do you have any other stories?" And so he started pitching me these stories, and I was like, "Wow, some of these stories are awesome, but they don't really fit in like the big three. And so why don't we back you?" And he was like, "Okay, let's do it." But in the midst of it all, we became good friends, and I learned a lot of opportunities that we could pursue within the space because a lot of the creators we worked with actually also felt like the space had only one of two choices. One is kind of working for the big two, and then you're basically paid your wage, and then you do what you do. But then on the other side, you have creator owned, where you could take your own risks and do your own thing. But that's not everyone's appetite. And so we actually developed this partnership publishing model. And because everything's published on the blockchain, all our creators participate in the life of the IP. And so while you're also participating as an NFT owner, you'll also be helping grow the career of these artists. And so, for example, our very first drop that later this year will be with Sean Chen, who is known as the designer of the modern day Iron Man. If you were to go to Marvel and ask them for a brand guide of Iron Man, you'll see Sean's design all over it. And for me, I grew up, kind of similar as Nick and his grandfather. I grew up literally like being a huge fan of Sean's. And so to be able to work alongside him and do something very different and allow him to do his best work, I think that's the model we want to create. And I think that could only be done in community. And then lastly, kind of hopefully this answered your question more clearly, is we are a project agnostic company. So not only do we have our own originals, we also have our crossovers. And so yesterday we made an announcement. I'm not sure how deep you guys are in kind of like the Web3 space, but like Azuki is a really prominent project that really kind of brought me into the space. And so we made an announcement yesterday that we will be launching a title, our first crossover title called Age of Valor, that will reside on our platform. And it's going to feature characters from the Azuki universe. And so that will be our step one use case for us to kind of set an example. Because anyone who's kind of been in the Web3 space long enough, you probably have a pretty big bag of IP that you don't know what to do with. And often, I don't blame anyone because Hollywood has always had really high barrier to entry. And when it comes to management of IP, most of it is done behind closed doors. So for me personally as a mission and our team as a mission is to build an infrastructure where we could decentralize what franchising means. So not only are you working in it, imagine you could own a character that's part of a universe and part of a story that you believe in, and really have a say in where that story goes. So that's kind of hopefully it gives you a good overview of what we're doing.
Great, thanks, Carly. I didn't mean to leak anything there, but appreciate you sharing. So next question is to Matt. With the Batcows project, you've allowed holders to participate in the creation of the newest Batman story and comic by voting on things like the newest Batmobile design or Batman sidekick. What has the response been to this model from the community? Have you seen a lot of participation? Have you seen a lot of excitement around it? What kind of success have you seen?
Yeah, that's a great question. We've seen, I can't remember the numbers off the top of my head. It's either 50 or 70%. It's like a crazy number on the open rates of the emails asking fans, cow holders to participate, but then the actual participation too has just been really, really insane. I mean, if you look at, this is public information, so I can share this. If you scrape Twitter mentions for brands that are involved in NFTs and Web3, the top 3 projects are NBA Top Shot in terms of the amount of mentions they get on Twitter. In number 2 position is Nike and Artifact. And in number 3 position is not DC Comics or all of the DC Comics NFTs that we've done. It is just Batcows. This community is insane in terms of the levels of participation and everything that people are doing together as a community. And it's had a global impact for DC. And I don't know how many people in the community realize just how engaged they are. And I know from being a member of this community how fun it is and how engaged it is and how this group of people has become friends and is meeting in real life and making all kinds of content together. Like, it's just been crazy. Like, I have never seen engagement like this on anything, working over 20 years in content across every imaginable platform, publishing, gaming, movies, TV, etc. This is crazy, and it's about building communities in this new way.
Love your excitement about that, Matt. I love everything you guys are doing, and very much looking forward to the future of what you guys are going to continue to build. So next question is to Nick. So the Satoshiverse was inspired by the comic art of Jose Delbo and his Bitcoin-themed superhero, Satoshi the Creator. Are the Satoshiverse's comic roots important to the Satoshiverse, and how will you continue to keep comics central in the Satoshiverse over time?
Yeah, so, for me, when I got involved in the Web3 space back in 2017, there really wasn't a lot of comic art generally, but there certainly wasn't, a lot of forward movement in the space, right? The space was still small. There really, you hadn't seen the big wave that happened in late 2020. So when I got into the space, one of the things we really wanted to do was think about how do you solve that, right? How do you get the big players to come in? How do you also, do your own thing and create characters for the space? So when we created Satoshi, the original concept was, Satoshi, the story behind Satoshi as such a prominent character within kind of the lore of the blockchain space more generally, disappears for 20 years and no one hears about him, and no one knows why, and it kind of sounded like the origins of a superhero story. So I think it was probably early 2020. Jose was just starting to think about NFTs, and I started talking to him about this idea of creating a superhero for the blockchain space and incorporating these themes. And he was really excited because he had spent his entire career drawing superheroes that other people had created. So that opportunity to create a superhero, even before he started releasing NFTs, was something that was always interesting to him. And kind of the stars aligned early on. When Jose got into the space, it was amazing, really, to see how quickly people embraced the comic art that he was putting out, but also having had the opportunity to create the first comic NFT really got us thinking about, okay, what is it going to look like to release a comic book on the blockchain? What is that going to be? And so when Vivi and now Palm with DC started releasing full comic books and starting to push the boundaries of what's possible, that's really excited me in where all this is going. And so I've always felt that the comic industry in general has become so much more immersive with movies and AR and all the different non-Web3 tech that's really allowed comic IP to explode, in the last 20 years and frankly saved what many considered to be a dying industry. So for us, we want to think about what happens next, right? I think something can have comic elements and a comic story and comic roots and at the same time be innovative and be forward looking and think about, okay, it may not be that we're printing Satoshi verse comic books. It may be that the story is some sort of gamified experience and you're reading about the lore that way, or that there's AR layers that allow you to actually be the superheroes that you love. And all this new tech, I think that's what excites me, is that comics, the reason I think they're so valuable is that they really become, as kids we're experiencing these stories in different ways, but at the end of the day we connect with the characters, right? We look up to these characters as heroes. We see traits in them that we see in ourselves, and almost always it's some story of perseverance that we can connect with, right? And I think that that's what makes comics special. And I think that when we're trying to encapsulate that within, what is this going to look like in 10, 15, 20 years, even what's this going to look like in the next couple of years, I think it's important that we really embrace the newest tech. So I guess it's a long-winded way of saying that comics, we couldn't get rid of comics as part of our roots if we tried, right? It's so deeply ingrained in who we are and what we're doing. But I guess that could translate to a million different things. And I think what excites us, at Apollo and at Satoshiverse is just thinking through the new way to present comic IP that maybe hasn't been done before, or maybe has recently been done and people really like it and we put our own spin on it. So I think the answer is definitely yes, and I'm excited to see all the different ways that we're going to be able to do that.
Great. Thanks, Nick. So next question, we're going to open up to everyone. What are some of the biggest challenges for the adoption of digital comics, especially from physical collectors? So I'm going to start this one off with Sean.
The biggest problem I think I've seen from physical collectors is that they look at Web3 as something that's, they kind of look at it as like a big rug pull. They hear a lot of negativity in the news, a lot of cryptocurrencies have crashed, and they have a really negative just connection towards Web3, which is, it's a shame, because if they really took the time, like especially from what you've seen on Vivi over the past year, the people who've got involved in this space, who started collecting these digital comic books, they've fallen in love with collecting because of these digital collectibles. And they're now buying physical collectibles. They're now buying physical comics. It's incredible. It's incredible. And we're seeing it all the time. We're getting more questions about physical comic books than we are digital. And that's what we're really excited about. And also at the same time, what's really interesting, and we're not really thinking too much about this right now, but like Marvel Comics #1, for example, there's only 65 copies now in the CGC census. 65. That's it. That was a comic book that had almost 1 million copies printed back in the 30s. There's only 65 left, and there's possibly less than 100 in existence today. So in a way, these NFTs have created an opportunity where it can encapsulate this comic forever, and people can always have true ownership now of this comic because of it, which is something really important to think about. Especially, next 100 to 200, 300 years, who knows if those 65 comics will even be around? Who knows? So it's super important.
Awesome. Thanks, Sean. Trevor, do you want to go next?
Yeah, I think for me, it's a really interesting question. I think there's I think the number one thing that I think people get caught up on is just the lack of tangibility, like the fact that you can't physically hold it. That's the only one. Like I can buy that. There's so many other excuses that I think are people just parroting what other people have said, and a lot of stuff where negativity towards NFTs, like on the comic side, borrowed from the negativity people express towards comic in other categories, like whether it's like coming namely or from like gaming or from like more standard like more finance products. I think some of those criticisms are borrowed, and I don't think in a lot of cases people are what they're doing is there's the difference between almost like sentiment and behavior. Like they're saying these things, but will they actually act in such a way that they don't go out and buy it? And I think the thing that actually gets around that is, in my mind, is quality bar and a value proposition. If you can make something that meets or exceeds their expectations around what good looks like in whatever their uh, IP or brand of choice is, they will go for it. So, like as an example, like we're so used to seeing, these comic book characters in like beautifully arted comics, in very very big budget movies and games, and that's like the level of media consumption that we're used to and what we expect. And then you show someone what is ostensibly a mobile quality asset, where they're conditioned to think of mobile quality assets as something they should get for free. And I think it works against them. And to me, that's a quality bar problem. They have a set of expectations, and this thing that you're trying to sell them doesn't meet those expectations. So I think the opportunity here, and this is a big thing about what our focus is with like McFarlane Toys Digital, is trying to meet or exceed the expectations that you have around the IP compared to the other ways you're engaging with the IP. And I think if you can pull that off, that's how you bring other people in. For us, we have this wonderful analog to physical toys. So we make these physical toys. They're extremely high detailed, and they're available at very reasonable prices. And people are used to collecting, engaging with McFarlane Toys in that way. If we can capture or exceed that quality in the digital space at the same or lower price point, I think that's a way that you can, at least for us, that's where we can bring the audience in. But to me, it all comes down to value proposition to that fan, to make them want to get over whatever. It's not that like whatever, if you want to call it a switching cost from like engaging with the IP, with these IP and like the more traditional media verticals, to moving to ours, if that makes sense. In our case, physical to digital, but in a lot of cases, it might be like film to this digital, or the NFT space, or games to the NFT space. Like you have to be able to overcome that quality bar, because if you're not meeting it, they're not going to come, in my opinion. But I think it's a very attainable goal. I hate to do this. I actually have a hard stop at 11, so I'm happy to answer. I know we have like a couple more questions, so I'll hang out until then, but I might have to jump at that point.
No problem, Trevor. Thanks so much for answering that question. And yeah, no problem if you to jump. So, and Matt, why don't you go next?
Yeah, apologies, I've got to drop in 2 minutes.
Okay.
Yeah, look, it's a great question. It's still, like this whole space is like email in the 1970s, right? It's just like, it looks weird from the outside, and we're all like a bunch of like super early nerds, and we're excited, but the rest of the world's kind of scratching their head like, why are you trading pictures for money? I don't understand. And it's on us to really show the wider world, like, what is going on here. And I love everybody trying to do that in the various ways that we've talked about here. The approach we've taken with DC is very much in line with what you can do with a company like DC, where you can plug into all the cool things that they're doing IRL, online, everywhere, and start to offer fans really amazing features and fun and benefits. But then the other end of it, and I think probably, I think the thing that's really going to impact the wider world is doing interesting things with ownership rights. And I'm not saying this is off the table with DC. It's just not something we've done yet. But doing things where fans have actually some rights over the characters that they buy and get to play with them in different ways. And I've heard a few people talk about this on this panel. Broadside, a number of other projects I'm involved with, we're doing this where that's the other end of this, where it's like, no, it's a picture of a character, but you actually own that character, and you can go and make a whole new thing with that character, and that just adds value to all the other characters in this world. That is a fundamentally new thing, and we've only got the few of the building blocks so far to really start doing that. As we develop, as the metaverse develops, as ways to sort of scale 3D modeling quickly and file interoperability all starts to just become a bit tighter. That stuff, like the fidelity on that stuff for the people outside looking in, is going to improve, and there's going to be a real oh shit moment where people are like, oh, okay, no, it's not a JPEG. This is a totally different way to have fun and build stories and do all kinds of things. We're not there yet, but I think we're very close.
100%, guys. And I think that the key takeaway there is it's about creating new experiences, making things different. We have reached the 1 hour mark. So real quick, we do a giveaway every week, and we give away this week we're giving away an 8 Mil Army avatar, and the winner has been selected, and it's Corey Berry. So Corey Berry, congratulations. Please DM us your ETH address, and we'll get you that avatar. And then I just want to take a minute to thank all the awesome guests that we had today. This was a really well attended, really everyone, I know that the audience appreciated it, and I certainly appreciated all of your insight. So great to have all of you here. Please, anyone who's here, please follow and keep track of what all these awesome people and projects are doing. I would definitely encourage you to check them all out, as I have. We do this every week, so next week we'll be doing another one with some really interesting guests there as well. But I just wanted to thank everybody, and I know a bunch of you have to jump off, so feel free. But thank you so much for joining, and we will see you next week.
Thank you, Nick. This is awesome. Thank you, Spencer, for the invite. This is awesome. I could hang out for a little bit too if you guys would hang out.
Cool. Yeah, I just anyone who wants to drop off can drop off. And yeah, I think we're at a good point, to wrap it up. Unless Carl, there was something you wanted to wrap up with. If you wanted to talk a little bit more about 247 or 24/7. Now I'm realizing it's 24/7, and anything that you guys are doing. But I think we're at a good breaking point.
Sure. No, I just want to actually piggyback off what both I think Matt and Trevor was saying about this whole challenge of adapting the digital comics from physical collectors. And I think for me personally speaking, is the way I see it is it's all habits. We are creatures of habit. But automobiles was a bad thing because people love their wagons and trains, right? And so as much as us humans like to fight change, I think it's inevitable. And I don't think it's either physical or digital, but it's really figuring out how they coexist. And I really do feel like it's how these two interconnect that will benefit every collector's asset management strategy in the long run. Like for me personally, I don't even own one stock under my name, but I love my comics and comic art. And we all have choices of how we want to spend our money. But my wife is an ER nurse, and she's never seen someone on a deathbed count their bank accounts, but rather as regrets of what they didn't do. And so I think today, like everyone in the audience here is here because they have a gut feeling about this as a future. So I would really just advise everyone to trust your gut and dive deeper into it all. And I think when it comes to all of us here, I love this panel today. So I'm super thankful, Spencer, for having me, because when I think about Web3, it's about the rising tide lifts all boats. As a whole, we're too tiny. We had a blimp on the radar with this last bull run, but now it's small again because now we're in bear. So what I want to see is actually a lot more collaborations happen because it's not really about you and I competing against each other. It's about us, the new, competing against the old. So yeah, I'm super thankful to have met everyone today. So really excited to meet all you guys, and my DM's always open.
Yeah, thank you, Carl. Really appreciate you coming on.
Awesome. Well, again, thank you guys so much. I think we could probably talk about this topic for several hours, and maybe we will have something similar like this again, just because of how important comics are to what every one of us are doing. But I guess until next time, I will see all of you later. Make sure to as I said, follow everybody, and jump on for our next one. If you caught this at the end, it was recorded, so feel free to, you'll, as soon as I end it, I think you'll be able to play it back. So see you next time, and thanks again, everyone, for joining.
Thanks.